world's highest waterfall drops more than 900 meters down the face of a remote plateau in South America. Vast tracts of land here remain completely unexplored. Shrouded mountaintops hide the world's oldest rocks. And among those rocks dwell mysterious creatures more ancient than the dinosaurs. For centuries, legendary rivers of gold and fields of precious stones have lured explorers and adventurers here. Many have disappeared without a trace. This lush and exotic wilderness is one of the least known places on Earth. Uncovering its secrets has been the lifelong passion of one man. A pilot, explorer, biologist and filmmaker, Adrian Warren has been here many times. No one on Earth has a better understanding of this wonderland. Now, once more, Adrian is about to make a journey of discovery into the lost world. Located in the southeastern corner of Venezuela, this Eden is a vast group of plateaus, known to the local people as Tepuis. Mount Roraima is a giant flat-topped mountain located where the boundaries of Brazil, Venezuela and Guyana meet. It exists in isolation, a misty summit cut off from the surrounding landscape by sheer, breathtaking cliffs. This giant block of sandstone is called a Tepui, and it stands in one of the least known regions on Earth. And here, in gullies and crevices, among tortured rock shapes, strange animals and plants found nowhere else on Earth cling precariously to life. For centuries, this region lay completely unexplored. Many people believed it was a lost world inhabited by dinosaurs. But for one man, this lost world became a passion. Adrian Warren has spent much of his life exploring and studying the mysterious Tepuis of Venezuela. An expedition journal he wrote 30 years ago describes his first visit here.
It was 1971, and I parachuted in, the leader of a team of scientists eager to explore this completely unknown territory. I was 21 years old and excited by the chance to go where no human had ever been. We made our way upriver until obstacles and rapids forced us to take to the forest. Then, working on compass bearings, we spent a month cutting a trail, traversing streams, balancing our way across natural bridges, and making scientific collections. Much of what we found was new to science.
Among the several new species they encountered was a tree frog named Hyla warreni, after its discoverer. Adrian and his team hacked their way through slime forest as they approached the northern base of Roraima. But they didn't make it far up the plateau. Overhanging rock more than 350 meters high prevented them from reaching the summit. Adrian was not deterred. He vowed that he would return, reach the top of Roraima, and uncover the secrets of the magical Tepuis. Now, 30 years later, Adrian has come back to realize his dream. His mission is to make it to the top of Roraima's prow and to retrace the journeys of the early explorers who ventured into this remote part of South America. In the 19th century, before the invention of aeroplanes and other mechanical aids, travel to this remote area was a huge undertaking. It could take weeks of toil and hardship to cross a stretch of forest that can be traversed by plane in an hour today. Many places were officially pronounced inaccessible and appeared as blank spaces on maps. The summits of the Tepuis are surrounded by sheer rock walls, and to those early explorers they seem to be impregnable. There are over 100 of these mysterious plateaus, and even today, fewer than half have been explored. The Tepuis are composed of some of the oldest known rocks in the world, and at one stage, prehistoric animals may have lived on their plateaus. Adrian has visited this region several times before, but is still astonished by the Tepuis and their seemingly unscalable cliffs. Flight has enabled explorers to examine the Tepuis much more easily, and their origins are now more clearly understood. But just over 100 years ago, before anyone set foot on these lofty plateaus, there was intense speculation about what might exist on their summits. Early explorers in the 1800s focused their attentions on one of the largest Tepuis, Roraima. They knew that the Tepuis were very ancient and were convinced that prehistoric life might still survive on their isolated summits. Expeditions were organized, which aimed to uncover the secrets of the legendary Mount Roraima. For these Victorian explorers, the only possible way to reach Roraima was by canoe. But the journey was long and took them through uncharted territory full of unknown dangers and disease. As they traveled, they encountered previously undiscovered creatures, including whole families of giant otters. Because these animals had never seen humans before, they were completely unafraid of the new visitors. But the explorers also faced a great many dangers, as Adrian knows only too well.
After more than a month of travelling, they may have had the Tepuis in sight, but soon there would be rapids to negotiate. This time, I had the help of experienced guides. But for the early explorers, moving on the rivers was many times more difficult and dangerous. Then there were more obstacles: submerged logs, rocks, and shallow waters. Progress by river became increasingly challenging.
But there were also rewards for the explorers. The beauty of the landscape was unsurpassed. In the shallow upper reaches of the rivers and tumbling waterfalls, they found water flowing over beds of semi-precious jasper. even greater wonders were expected to lie ahead. Eventually, the explorers were forced to take to the forest and continue on foot. As Adrian found in 1971, this was not an easy task.
In order to reach Roraima and return, they had to carry with them everything they would need for the 2-month trek. They would have relied to a large extent on hunting for fresh meat, but it would not have been easy. It's a common misconception that in rainforest, snakes and monkeys dangle from every tree.
From his own journeys into the forest, Adrian knows that the wildlife is no more forthcoming now than it was then.
Birds such as this curassow, or rodents like this agouti, make good eating. But in the forest it's difficult to move silently. Sensible animals remain elusive, often warned of your presence in advance by the alarm calls of unseen birds. The animals are there, but it's possible to walk all day through the forest without seeing a single one. Beneath the steaming canopy, the forest interior is dark and damp. There's no horizon, no view of more than a few feet, and only broken glimpses of sky.
Day after punishing day, the early explorers cut their way through dense, oppressive forest that seemed to go on forever. Eventually they emerged onto open savanna, and there before them rose the cliffs of Roraima. Adrian recalls details from the accounts of those early explorers.
On their journey, the first explorers encountered numerous new wonders. Among them, the giant ant bear. It's one of many exotic creatures noted in their journals. Another animal often reported were rattlesnakes, a hidden threat for the unwary. Any encounter with a dangerous animal, indeed any accidental injury, often had fatal consequences for the early travelers. Their last contact with any settlement was at the village of Teruta. Teruta was a thriving Indian community where the expedition could find food and shelter. The village was abandoned in the 1920s. But even now it's possible to see the circular bare patches where the huts once stood. It was from here that the explorers surveyed the cliffs of Roraima, hoping to find a possible ascent route, and dreaming of the Victorian fantasy of a lost world.
Conan Doyle's novel and the film it inspired was based on a succession of expeditions that had failed to find a way up the cliffs of Roraima. As each one was abandoned, speculation about what might be found on the elusive plateau became more and more outlandish. Roraima secrets remained out of reach until 1884, when the British explorer Everard M. Tern decided to try to scale the cliffs by way of a diagonal ledge. Previous visitors had noticed the ledge and pronounced it unclimbable because of an apparent gap halfway across, where a waterfall had eaten through the rock. But M. Tern was undeterred, as Adrian recalls.
Im Tern's party cut a trail through a belt of tangled forest to reach the base of the cliffs. Much of the thick forest he struggled through was destroyed by a massive fire in 1925, started by the local Pemon people. In contrast to the trail today, Im Tern's journey was an ordeal, but his party finally reached the base of the ledge. Im Tern's progress up the bottom half of the ledge was difficult and exhausting, over tangled roots and branches covered in moss and slime, and steep slopes of slippery mud. The scale of the cliffs was awe-inspiring, but what had seemed from below to be treacherous ironically presented no serious challenge.
When Im Tern and his party reached the top, they entered a surreal world. The explorer wrote about it in his journal. All around us were rocks, seeming to defy every law of gravity. Countless caricatures of faces and animals, and unexpected objects. The landscape on the summit of Roraima has not changed since Im Tern's ascent nearly 120 years ago. In fact, it has probably changed very little in the last million years. But the only dinosaurs he found in this lost world were these fantastic prehistoric structures made of stone. Im Tern was exhausted and his party had run out of food, so they only stayed on the summit for a few hours. But during that brief time, Im Tern realized that the plants and animals surrounding him were unlike any he had ever seen before. The bleak, wind-swept plateau was a paradise, full of exotic plants and flowers. But they all had something in common. They were varieties of plant suited to a harsh and ancient environment. Among them, he discovered several species of carnivorous plant, including the sinister insect-eating pitcher plant. Even if there were no dinosaurs, Im Tern realized that this truly was a lost world, one worthy of further investigation. But his own exploration was over. In his journal, he noted that a thick mist enveloped us and heavy rain began to fall. The cold was suddenly intense. The party was forced to descend to the warmer climes below. Im Tern's climb opened the door to others desperate to reveal the true extent of Roraima's secrets. But 30 years later, aeroplanes would completely revolutionize exploration. Suddenly, it was possible to discover new worlds from the air. Spectacular sinkholes, like these on a tepuis called Sare-Sarenama, could now be seen. Each of the 300-meter-wide holes contains an isolated miniature forest, home to many unique species. People could now cross great tracts of forest and scrutinize unexplored mountaintops in relative comfort. But it was a daring and risky method of exploration. In the early days, they flew through the mountains navigating with just a compass and a lot of guesswork. One of the first pilots to explore the area was an American called Jimmy Angel, who came here looking for gold and on the 10th of November 1935 stumbled upon the world's highest waterfall. He was flying around the labyrinth of cliffs and canyons surrounding a huge plateau to the west of Roraima called Auyan Tepuis, or Devil Mountain. Suddenly, through the mist, he saw a column of water that dwarfed his tiny plane. Jimmy estimated the waterfall to be an incredible 1.5 kilometers high. Over 60 years later, Adrian retraces Jimmy Angel's flight of discovery. Jimmy had been looking for a remote mountaintop where some years earlier he had landed his plane and found an abundance of gold nuggets. It was while trying to find the mountain again that he discovered the waterfall. Adrian understands what the earlier pilot would have felt.
Without maps and only a compass to guide him, it's easy to understand how Jimmy became disoriented and flew into a dead-end canyon on Devil Mountain. Not many had believed his story of the gold, and not many believed his discovery of the mile-high waterfall, until an American expedition was sent to survey it. The official measurement, at 3,212 feet, fell short of a mile, but Angel Falls is still the world's highest. It's an awesome, indescribable feeling to approach this true wonder of the world from the air. It's one of those special experiences I'll never forget.
Jimmy Angel was convinced that the gold he had found years earlier had been on top of Devil Mountain and was determined to land his plane on the summit. With his wife Marie and 2 friends, he would attempt a daring landing on top of the Tepuis. Like the summit of Roraima, the top of Devil Mountain is rocky and divided by deep canyons. Angel and his companions finally found what they were looking for, a more or less flat, grassy area. Jimmy prepared to land his plane. Everything was going according to plan, until the wheels sank into a patch of soft ground. The plane nosed over. No one was injured in the crash, but the plane itself was destroyed. Jimmy and his passengers spent 2 days trying to salvage the plane, but eventually it became clear that they would have to make their escape on foot. their dreams of finding gold turned into a struggle for survival. Attempts at radio communication had failed, so they left a simple message pointing in the direction of their intended descent, then set off down the mountain. The summit plateau of Devil Mountain is huge, about 700 square kilometers. For Jimmy Angel's party, traversing its rugged, unexplored surface was a grueling ordeal. The journey down took them 11 days. Adrian knows the terrain well and understands the perils they would have faced on their descent.
Like Roraima, Devil Mountain does not make life easy for visitors intent on exploring its misty summit or its canyons. Many have died in the attempt. It's a common observation by those who set foot on Tepuis, even among the local people. One feels oppressed, like an intruder in a hostile place. It takes several days to climb Devil Mountain. Break a leg here and you're in serious trouble. Moving on the summit is worse. Its labyrinth of rocks and ravines force you on a zigzag route over even the shortest distance.
At the top of the mountain, there are vast rivers, stained gold by plant tannins. Adrian suspects that these rivers of gold may be what convinced Angel to attempt a landing here. Adrian reflects on his predecessor as he makes his way towards the world's highest waterfall, Angel Falls, named after the man who first discovered it.
Here on the top of Devil Mountain, I have a strange, eerie feeling of time standing still. This place really does feel lost in time, unchanged and untouched for millions of years. Watched by strange rock sentinels, I follow Angel's Golden River to where it plunges over the cliff. As it nears the cliff face, Angel's River cuts a channel deeply into the surface of the plateau, and in order to reach the edge, I must follow a tortuous path through a jumble of boulders. A safety line will allow me to lean out over Angel Falls. It's a 3,200-foot sheer drop to the forest below. Angel's River erupts from the cliff from tunnels some distance below the summit. It's truly one of the world's natural wonders.
When Jimmy Angel died in a plane crash in 1956, his ashes were scattered over his waterfall in a final tribute. For any pilot, the Tepuis are dangerous to fly. The abrupt cliffs are often shrouded by cloud, and turbulence, winds and powerful downdrafts can make conditions treacherous and escape impossible. The simplest of mechanical problems can become critical. Adrian explains some of the difficulties that aviators face in this region.
If your engine fails or you run out of fuel, you can only try to glide to a clearing. But those can be hard to find in the endless thick jungle below. When an airplane plunges through the forest canopy, the branches and leaves will quickly grow back, swallowing up the evidence. In areas where maps and communications are poor, the chances of escape are slim, and Tepuis country is littered with old wrecks. If it wasn't for aviators, though, most of this country would still be completely unknown.
In 1985, Adrian mounted and led another daring expedition. This time, it was to a small tepuis called Autana. It was at Autana that Adrian first discovered the origin of the Tepuis. These ancient tunnels are the oldest caves in the world. They were once part of an underground river system. At the time, all land here would have been at the level of Autana's summit. In order to investigate the caves further, Adrian decided to skydive down to them. After landing, they still had a long way to go.
To reach the caves, we descended for almost 1,000 feet down the wall of Autana. The scale was unbelievable. The ledge outside the cave had seemed tiny from the plain, but was covered by trees and boulders. The cave itself was huge, passing from one side of the mountain to the other, with a central chamber reminiscent of a cathedral dome. It's difficult to say when water last flowed through these tunnels, but they were formed some 3 billion years ago, before life appeared on this planet.
It takes several hours to fly from Autana to Roraima in a small plane, but once upon a time, their summits were connected. At that time, South America was joined to West Africa. As the continents drifted apart, enormous upheavals began to break up a huge sandstone massif. This is what formed the individual tepuis. Centuries of rain and wind have continued the natural erosion process and sculpted the rocks here into their surreal shapes. Even for Adrian, who knows this place so well, it's a landscape that inspires wonder and awe.
Following explorer Im Turn's route, I have finally climbed to Roraima summit and am now traversing it to try to reach the prow. The towering caricatures of rock faces create an eerie landscape. There's little recognizable sound here, save for an occasional bird, gentle piping of frogs, and the whistling of the wind. When you spend a long time in a place like this, the imagination begins to play tricks on the mind. Some of the sounds I think I've heard are otherworldly, straight out of dreams, even nightmares. There is a curious thrill, though, in experiencing as remote a place as this completely alone. It's part of the bewitching magic of the Tepuis, part of what keeps drawing me back here.
Outside the rocky labyrinth, the summit of Roraima has areas of flat rock and shallow, boggy meadows. It's here that most of the plant life is to be found. To survive here, plants have to be adaptable. This stegolepis, for example, has no permanent roots, and its twisted form indicates it has led a nomadic existence, moved from place to place by flash floods. Rainwater, which collects in deep pools, is channeled along furrows in the rock surface, slowly eroding the earth. Some sedimentary layers of sandstone are softer than others, and they erode more quickly. This is what produces the complex networks of underground water systems and isolated sinkhole ponds. It's because different layers erode at different speeds that the amazing shapes here are formed. Erosion has also revealed layers of quartz crystals on some parts of the plateau. The quartz may explain a local legend that Roraima contains fields of diamonds. The Tepuis are an exotic botanical paradise, and almost every plant here is found only on Roraima. They have just shallow soil or tiny rock crevices to cling to, and temperatures on the plateau can soar and then drop to freezing. Yet somehow, many species of fragile, colorful flower thrive here. In order to cope with nutrient-poor soils, carnivorous plants like the sundew supplement their diet by trapping and digesting insects. The red color of the leaves attracts the insect, which becomes trapped by the sticky tentacles. The victim's movement as it struggles to escape is what triggers the leaf to close around it. Another carnivorous species, Heliamphora, has bucket-shaped pitchers that collect rainwater. Like the sundew, the red color attracts its insect prey. The insect is safe until it crawls onto the slippery inner surface of the pitcher. When it does, it will fall in, drown, and be digested by enzymes produced by the plant. Inside the pitcher, downward-pointing hairs ensure there is no escape for the victim. Just as certain plants are peculiar to the Tepuis and often to a single mountaintop, many birds here are also unique species. For the most part, the birds that live here are seed eaters and nectar feeders, who over centuries have adapted to this hostile environment. But there is one very special animal on Roraima, a creature so ancient that it predates the dinosaurs. The black frog, called Oreophrynella, is more closely related to African species than any in South America. So it has probably lived in this region since before the continents separated. As the ancient mountain mass broke up into isolated blocks, the black frog was trapped on this summit and adapted to its new, harsh habitat. The frog was discovered in 1895 when the first biologists came to Roraima. When picked up, it tucks itself into a ball and becomes motionless. The frog can neither hop nor swim and has opposable toes which help it cling to slippery rock surfaces. When it's cool, its black color helps it to keep warm. If it's hot, it either finds shade or immerses its body in running water. Because of its inability to swim, many of these primitive frogs have probably been washed off the summit by flash floods. On his first expedition here, Adrian also encountered frogs.
In 1971, in the forest below the cliffs, I found 4 of what I called mystery frogs, which were without doubt closely related to the summit species. What intrigued me then was how they got here. Were they an ancient species that had lived here for millions of years? Or was their origin more recent? Survivors perhaps of flash floods on the summit that somehow adapted to this new environment. For me, as a young biologist, they were a very exciting discovery, and their exact origin still remains a mystery.
Adrian's first expedition to Roraima in 1971 was rich in discoveries. But none of his team had been prepared for the final overhanging rock face, Roraima's prow, that prevented them from reaching the summit. Now, 30 years later, Adrian is determined to reach the top.
Crossing the summit of Roraima is not an easy task. Between me and the prow are cliffs, loose rock, and deep canyons channeling water outwards to feed the 3 great rivers of this part of South America, the Amazon, Orinoco, and Essequibo. My route led me due north through a wide gully filled with otherworldly plants, until, finally, only a few rocky crevices separated me from my goal. The tip of Roraima's summit commands an extraordinary view, looking north across unbroken forest. Looking vertically down, I could see the site of our camp 30 years before. It reminded me of the thrill of my first experience in a place where no human had been before.
From the moment the first intrepid travelers saw Roraima and wondered what may dwell on its elusive summit, many have been lured here to explore the Tepuis. They are one of the last unknown frontiers on our planet, but even now, we have only just begun to uncover their secrets.